Have you ever wondered how love finds people in the most unexpected ways? This video reveals how a wealthy billionaire, in his lowest moment, was rescued by a humble bus conductor, and how that one act pulled them into a life neither imagined. Stay with me, because the truth behind their journey is more surprising than any fairy tale you've heard. Walk away now, and you'll never discover the twist that left everyone speechless. Before we get fully into this heartwarming story, I need you to hit the like button now and tell me what time it is and where you are watching in the comments below. The night was darker than usual, and so was his fate. Clement Okoro, a name that once commanded boardrooms and lit up magazine covers, now stumbled alone on a deserted Lagos street. Just hours ago, he had been the guest of honor at a billionaire's gala. Now stripped of his wallet, his phone, and even his dignity, he was just another man in trouble. A flat tire had forced him out of his sleek black car, and in a cruel twist, a group of street thieves had cornered him. They didn't care who he was. They didn't care about his billions. All they saw was a helpless man. They took everything, leaving him with torn clothes and a bruised face. For the first time in years, Clement felt fear. Raw, naked fear. The kind he thought money had erased from his life. He staggered to the roadside, desperate, waving his hands at passing vehicles. None stopped. To them, he was just another distressed stranger. And then, out of the darkness, came the rattling sound of an old yellow bus. Its engine coughed, its headlights flickered, and from behind the wheel, a woman's voice called out, "Are you all right, sir?" It was strange. In a city where everyone hurried past pain, someone had noticed him. Someone had cared. She was a bus conductor, her uniform simple, her hands calloused from work. Her eyes, however, held something different: courage. Clement looked at her, too proud to beg, yet too broken to hide his need. That night, their worlds collided. A billionaire with nothing, and a woman who had never had much at all. And neither of them knew it yet. But this single act of kindness would ignite a story that would change both their lives forever. Long before that night, Emmanuella had learned that life rarely gave second chances. She was no stranger to hardship. At just 28, she carried the weight of a family that depended on her. Her father had died young, her mother was bedridden, and her younger siblings looked up to her as both sister and provider. Every morning before dawn, she climbed onto that rickety yellow bus. She wasn't the driver, she was the conductor. The one who shouted destinations, collected fares, and sometimes argued with passengers who tried to cheat her. It was work most people sneered at. But for Emmanuella, it was survival. Her palms were hardened from gripping railings all day, her voice often hoarse from yelling over the city's chaos. Yet beneath the toughness was a softness she never allowed the world to see. She had a heart that noticed pain, even the kind others ignored. That was why when she saw Clement by the roadside that night, bruised, confused, and abandoned, something inside her refused to pass him by. She pulled the bus to a halt, ignoring the grumbles of passengers who didn't want to waste time. "Are you all right, sir?" she asked again, louder this time. Clement turned toward her, his pride battling his desperation. He had never spoken to a bus conductor in his life. To him, people like her were invisible, faceless, nameless. Yet tonight she was the only one who saw him. For a brief moment, their eyes met, his filled with disbelief, hers with unshakable resolve. She motioned to him, "Come inside before something worse happens." And though every part of Clement resisted, he had no choice. With slow, hesitant steps, the billionaire climbed onto a bus seat for the very first time in his life. That single decision, to step into her world, would change everything. The moment Clement stepped into the yellow bus, the air shifted. Every passenger turned, eyes narrowing, whispers crackling like fire in dry grass. His once perfect suit was torn, his shirt stained, his face bruised. To them, he wasn't a billionaire. He looked more like a beggar who had wandered in by mistake. "Madam Conductor," one man muttered loudly, "why you carry this kind of person? He go bring bad luck for all of us." A woman hissed, pulling her handbag closer. Another passenger chuckled. "See as him dey shake, maybe na thief catch him for road." The bus erupted in quiet ridicule, and Clement, who was used to the respectful silence of boardrooms and luxury cars, shrank in his seat, His pride screamed at him to get off. But where would he go? The streets were colder, crueler. Emmanuella stood firm. She turned sharply toward the murmuring passengers. Leave she said, her voice cutting through the noise. Person fit get problem today. E no mean say, e no be human being. Her words silenced the bus. For a moment, even Clement lifted his eyes, stunned. No one had defended him like that in years. Not since his mother had passed away. As the bus jerked forward, Clement clutched the edge of his seat, unused to the rough, bumpy ride. Each turn reminded him of how far he had fallen in just a few hours. But across from him, Emmanuella's eyes stayed steady on the road, her presence a strange anchor. She had no idea who he was. To her, he was just a man in need. And to him, that made her kindness feel heavier than gold. This was only the beginning of a pond neither of them saw coming. Clement sat stiffly on the cracked leather seat, his mind racing faster than the bus itself. Just a few hours earlier, he had been surrounded by wealth, luxury, and respect. Now he was being mocked by strangers on a crowded bus. His pride ached more than his bruises. He had built an empire, employed thousands, and signed checks that decided the fate of entire companies. Yet here he was, hiding his face, praying no one recognized him in this humiliating state. He stole a glance at Emmanuella. Her voice rang out with authority as she called out the next bus stop, collected fares, and managed quarrels among the passengers. She was fierce, unshaken, almost regal in the way she controlled the chaos around her. Clement found himself watching her more closely than he intended. She wasn't just working, she was surviving. Each movement told a story of strength forged by hardship, of dignity in the midst of struggle. And he wondered silently, how could someone with so little still carry themselves with such power? For the first time in years, Clement felt small, not because of his loss, but because he realized there was a world he had ignored all his life, a world where people like Emmanuella fought battles every single day, without applause, without headlines. The bus jerked to a halt, and Clement's thoughts were interrupted by a harsh voice. "Conductor, you never give me my change," a passenger barked. Clement watched as Emmanuella spun around, her eyes sharp, her voice steady, putting the man in his place with wit and firmness. No fear, no hesitation. It was in that moment Clement realized she was unlike anyone he had ever met. The bus rattled down the uneven road, and Clement sat quietly, his thoughts heavy. He wasn't used to silence. Usually his world was filled with the hum of meetings, phone calls, and polite conversations. But tonight, silence pressed on him like a weight. He looked at Emmanuella again. She stood at the open door of the bus, balancing with ease as the vehicle swayed, her voice firm as she called out the next stop. Despite the mocking stares of the passengers, she hadn't once looked back at him with judgment. Finally, when the bus slowed at a junction and the noise died down, Clement leaned slightly forward. His voice was low, roughened by exhaustion. "Thank you for stopping." Emmanuella turned, surprised. For a moment she studied him. The bruises on his face, the expensive fabric of his torn suit, the look of a man who clearly didn't belong on her bus. Then she gave a small shrug. "Not everyone will stop," she replied simply. "But sometimes, we all need someone to." Her words struck him deeper than he expected. He opened his mouth to explain, to tell her who he really was, but something held him back. For the first time, Clement didn't want his name or wealth to speak for him. Instead, he asked, "Why did you?" Emmanuella's gaze softened for just a second before she turned back to the road. "Because I know what it feels like when no one does." Her answer silenced him completely. He leaned back in his seat, staring out the window, but her words lingered, echoing louder than the bus engine. It was the first conversation of many, and it left Clement with questions he couldn't shake. The yellow bus finally screeched to a halt at the last stop of the route. The passengers hurried off one by one, disappearing into the night, their laughter and arguments fading into silence. Soon only Clement remained inside, sitting awkwardly with his torn suit and battered pride. Emmanuella hopped down from the bus, stretching her tired arms after a long day. She glanced back at him, surprised to see he hadn't moved. "Sir," she called, "this is the last stop. You need to come down." Clement rose slowly, his body sore, But it wasn't the pain that kept him still, but Shane, it was uncertainty. He wanted to thank her properly, to tell her who he was, but he feared the look that might cross her face when she knew. Would she still see him as a man in need, or just another rich name she could never stand beside? He stepped out of the bus, standing under the dim streetlight. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he spoke carefully. "You didn't have to stop for me tonight, but you did. I won't forget it." Emmanuella tilted her head, studying him. She didn't ask for his story, didn't press for answers, didn't beg for anything in return. Instead, she gave him a small nod. "Sometimes all we can give is kindness," she said. "And maybe that's enough." Clement felt something shift inside him. He wanted to say more, but his throat tightened, so he simply lowered his gaze, turned, and began walking into the night. Yet, with every step, he felt her presence linger. The sound of her voice, the strength in her eyes. He didn't know it yet, but this was not the last time their paths would cross. Clement's driverless walk through the city ended at the tall gates of his estate. The guards, startled by his bruised face and torn clothes, rushed to let him in without a word. Their eyes widened in confusion, but Clement waved them off. He didn't want explanations. Not tonight. The mansion lights flickered on as he stepped inside. The grand chandelier glowed above him, the polished marble floors gleamed, and the silence was almost unbearable. Usually this silence meant peace. Tonight it felt like punishment. He lowered himself into the velvet chair in his study, staring at the untouched glasses of wine on the side table, the portraits of his achievements on the wall. But all of it looked different now. Empty, meaningless. Clement's mind drifted back to the bus. The crowded seats, the mocking laughter, the way Emmanuella's firm voice silenced them all. He remembered the steadiness in her eyes when she said, "Because I know what it feels like when no one does." Those words clung to him like a shadow. He had met countless women in the world of wealth, models, heiresses, socialites. Yet none of them had spoken with that kind of raw truth. None had looked at him without expectation, without calculation. For the first time in years, Clement realized he was curious about someone, not for what they had, but for who they were. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling, fighting the strange pull inside his chest. Why couldn't he get her out of his mind? It was a question that would follow him for days. While Clement sat in his vast, silent mansion, Emmanuella made her way to a small, crumbling building at the edge of the city. Her home was nothing more than two dimly lit rooms, but to her, it was a castle she had sworn to protect. Inside, her mother lay on a thin mattress, coughing softly. The illness had stolen her strength years ago, leaving her fragile and dependent. At a small wooden table, two of Emmanuella's younger siblings bent over their school books, the light from a single kerosene lamp flickering across their tired faces. "Welcome back, sister," one of them said with a weary smile. Emmanuella forced a smile in return, though her body ached from the long day. She dropped the coins she had earned onto the table, a small pile that would barely stretch for food and medicine. But it was all she had. Her mother stirred, her voice faint. "You're working too hard, child. You can't carry the world on your shoulders." Emmanuella knelt beside her, taking her frail hand. "If I don't, who will? We'll be all right, Mama. I promise if I know." The words came easily, but deep inside she knew they were only half true. Each day was a battle between survival and despair, yet she had no choice but to fight. As she lay down that night, exhaustion tugging at her eyes, her mind drifted back to the stranger she had helped, the man in the torn suit, the one who had said thank you like it was the hardest thing in the world. She wondered who he really was and why his pain had looked so much like her own. Little did she know that same man was lying awake in his mansion, wondering about her too. 3 nights passed, but Clement found no peace. He sat in board meetings, surrounded by men in sharp suits, yet his mind drifted to the yellow bus. He attended dinners where wine flowed freely, but every laugh sounded hollow. His assistants noticed his distraction, but none dared to ask. How could they understand that the man who had everything was haunted by a woman who had nothing? On the 4th morning, Clement stood by the tall windows of his mansion, watching the busy streets far below. The memory of Emmanuella's voice still lingered, strong, steady, unforgettable. He clenched his fists. He had to see her again. But how? He didn't know her name, didn't know where she lived. All he had was the memory of that rattling yellow bus and the courage of the woman who had stopped for him. So, against every instinct of pride, Clement did something he had never done before. He dressed in plain clothes, left his car behind, and walked to the bus park at dawn. The smell of fuel and dust hit him instantly. Conductors shouted destinations, drivers honked impatiently, and the chaos of the city pulsed in every corner. Clement moved slowly through the crowd, scanning faces, listening for a familiar voice. And then he heard it. Ojuelegba, Yaba, enter with your change-o. The voice was firm, commanding, and unmistakable. His heart leapt. There she was, Emmanuella, standing at the bus door, one hand on the railing, her eyes alive with the fire of survival. Clement froze. A part of him wanted to step forward to call her name, though he didn't even know it yet. Another part of him held back, uncertain how to bridge the worlds between them. But one thing was clear. Fate had given him another chance. Clement stood frozen for a moment, his heart pounding like he was a young man again. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. But now, approaching a bus conductor felt like the hardest step of his life. Emmanuella was busy, calling out to passengers, helping an elderly woman climb in, arguing good-naturedly with a stubborn trader about fare. She hadn't noticed him yet. Finally, Clement gathered his courage and walked closer. "Good morning," he said softly. She turned sharply at the sound of his voice. For a second, she didn't recognize him. His face was healed, his clothes clean, his bearing different. But then her eyes widened. "It's you," she whispered. Clement gave a small nod. "Yes, it's me, the man you helped the other night." Her expression was unreadable. "You look different." "I owe you more than you know," he said. "I wanted to thank you properly." Emmanuella glanced at the line of impatient passengers behind him. "This is no place for thanks. People are waiting." But Clement didn't move. "Then let me wait too, at least until I can speak with you." For a moment their eyes locked, his steady, hers cautious. She finally sighed and waved him aside. "Fine, but don't block the way." Clement stepped back, his heart strangely lighter. She hadn't pushed him away. Not yet. As the bus filled and rumbled to life, Clement knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to let this chance slip away. The bus pulled out of the station, lurching into the morning traffic. Clement stood by the side, watching until it disappeared into the distance. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of impatience that had nothing to do with business. He wanted to see her again, not just for a fleeting moment, but long enough to understand who she truly was. So he returned the next day, and the next. Each morning before the sun fully rose, Clement found himself at the bus park, dressed simply, blending into the crowd. He never announced who he was. He simply watched. He watched Emmanuella's energy as she guided passengers in, her firmness when people tried to cheat her, the quiet smile she gave to tired mothers carrying children. She worked with a strength that fascinated him. On the third morning, as she collected fares, she noticed him again. Her brows furrowed. "You again? What are you doing here?" Clement offered a faint smile. "Maybe I like bus parks." She rolled her eyes. "Nobody likes bus parks." "Then maybe," he said carefully, "I just want to understand the kind of woman who stopped for me when no one else did." His words made her pause. For a brief moment, he thought she would chase him away. But instead, she looked at him, truly looked, and then shook her head. "You're strange," she murmured, turning back to her passengers. But Clement knew that wasn't rejection. It was the opening of a door. Day by day, he lingered near, sometimes helping her calm unruly passengers, sometimes carrying heavy bags for the elderly. He was out of place in her world, but he didn't care. With every passing hour, Clement found himself pulled deeper into Emmanuella's life, a life he was beginning to respect more than any boardroom deal. It was late evening when the bus finally rolled into the dusty station after a long day. Passengers shuffled off, leaving the vehicle empty and quiet. Clement lingered nearby, as he had done so many times before. Emmanuella wiped her brow with the back of her hand, exhaustion etched into every line of her face. She glanced up and saw him waiting. You don't give up, do you? She asked, half amused, half annoyed. Not when it comes to things that matter, Clement replied. Something in his tone made her hesitate. She slung her worn bag over her shoulder and started walking. Against her own better judgment, she didn't tell him to leave. Instead, she let him fall into step beside her. They walked through narrow streets, the sound of nighted traders filling the air. Finally, Clement spoke. Why do you work so hard? You could do something else. Emmanuella gave a short laugh, bitter and soft. Something else? For people like me, there isn't something else. There's just survival. Her words hung between them. A few blocks later, she stopped outside a small, crumbling building. Inside, a faint glow flickered through the window. This is home, she said simply. Clement followed her gaze and caught sight of two children reading under a dim lamp, their eyes heavy with sleep. On a bed nearby, a frail woman struggled to sit up, coughing. They're my family, Emmanuella said quietly, her voice almost breaking. My mother and siblings. Everything I do, every coin I earn is for them. Clement's throat tightened. He had seen wealth beyond measure, but standing there, looking into her world of sacrifice, he felt something he had long forgotten. Humility. Emmanuella straightened, brushing away the softness that had slipped into her voice. Now you know, so stop following me around like I'm some mystery. I'm just a woman trying to survive. But Clement shook his head slowly. No, Emmanuella, you're not just anything. You're extraordinary. Her eyes flickered with something unspoken. Surprise, perhaps, or disbelief. She turned quickly, stepping in wide before he could say more. But Clement knew a door had opened, even if just a little. After that night, Clement couldn't shake the image of Emmanuella's crumbling home from his mind. The flickering lamp, the coughing of her mother, the weary eyes of her siblings. They haunted him more than the memory of losing his wallet to thieves. He wanted to help, but he knew Emmanuella's pride. If he revealed who he truly was, if he showed up with wealth and solutions, she would push him away. She didn't trust easily, and she would never accept charity. So Clement chose another path. The next morning, he found a discreet way to act. Through one of his trusted aides, he arranged for a pharmacist in the neighborhood to donate medicine to Emmanuella's family at no cost. He also ensured that her siblings' school received new supplies under the guise of a community outreach program. Clement watched from a distance as Emmanuella picked up the medicine that evening, her face full of gratitude and confusion. She asked the pharmacist who had paid, but the man only shrugged, saying, "Sometimes blessings come quietly." That night, Clement felt a strange satisfaction, not the kind he usually felt after signing a deal, but something deeper, purer. Yet part of him longed to see her reaction if she knew it was him. Emmanuella, meanwhile, sat by her mother's side holding the new medicine in her hands. She whispered a prayer of thanks, but deep inside she wondered who had cared enough to ease her burden. And though Clement's name never crossed her mind, his unseen hand was already shaping her life. Days turned into weeks, and Clement's shadow never left the edges of Emmanuella's life. He was always there, at the bus park in the morning, walking beside her in the evenings, listening more than he spoke. He never complained, never demanded, never tried to force his way into her world. And yet, something about him didn't add up. One evening, as the bus ride ended and passengers spilled out, Emmanuella glanced at him. His clothes, though simple, were always too fine to belong to a man who lived on the edge like the others at the park. His words carried a weight, a refinement, like someone who had been educated far beyond her world. She remembered the night she first saw him, bruised, desperate, in torn fabric that even in ruin had looked expensive. Finally, her curiosity got the better of her. "Clement," she said as they walked down the narrow road, "who are you really?" He looked at her, startled by the sudden sharpness in her tone. "You're not like the men I see here every day," she continued. "You don't move like them. You don't talk like them. So why spend all this time around me? What do you want?" Clement paused, the truth pressing against his lips. For a moment, he almost told her about the mansion, the business empire, the billions. But something inside him held back. He feared that if he revealed his world too soon, she would shut him out forever. So instead, he smiled faintly. "Maybe I just want to learn what it means to live outside of glass walls." Emmanuella narrowed her eyes. That's not an answer. Maybe not, Clement admitted softly, but it's the only one I can give you for now. She studied him for a long moment, then shook her head. You're a mystery, Clement, and I don't like mysteries. But as she turned away, he caught the faintest trace of a smile on her lips, a smile that told him she hadn't pushed him away yet. And for Clement, that was enough. It was a sweltering afternoon when the crisis came. The bus had barely left the station when Emmanuella received a frantic call from one of her siblings. Mama can't breathe, the young voice cried over the crackling line. Her heart stopped. She shouted for the driver to stop, jumped down from the moving bus, and began running through the crowded streets. Clement, alarmed by her panic, chased after her without hesitation. When they reached the house, chaos met them. Her mother lay on the bed, gasping, her chest rising and falling in sharp, painful bursts. Her siblings clung to her hands, crying. Emmanuella froze, torn between fear and helplessness. What do I do? What do I do? She cried out, her composure finally shattering. Without thinking, Clement stepped forward. He pulled out his phone, dialed a private hospital directly, and barked urgent orders with a calm authority that stunned her. Within minutes, an ambulance was racing toward the house. Hold on, he told Emmanuella firmly, his hand steady on her shoulder. Help is coming. True to his word, the ambulance arrived quickly. Doctors rushed inside, lifting her mother gently but swiftly onto a stretcher. Emmanuella followed, her hands trembling, tears running freely down her cheeks. It wasn't until they were inside the hospital, the clean white halls, the speed of the staff, the way everyone moved with precision, that Emmanuella realized something. This wasn't the treatment of an ordinary patient. This was care that came at a cost far beyond what she could ever afford. She turned to Clement, suspicion burning in her eyes even as relief washed over her. Who are you, Clement? How could you arrange this so fast and with this kind of hospital? Clement looked at her, his secret now balancing on the edge. For the first time since they met, he couldn't hide the weight of his true self any longer. But before he could answer, the doctor emerged from the ward. She's stable for now. You came just in time. Emmanuella broke down in sobs of relief, clinging to her siblings. And Clement stood nearby, silent, knowing that his world and hers were about to collide in a way neither of them could escape. The hospital room was dim, save for the steady glow of machines humming beside Emmanuella's mother's bed. Her siblings had fallen asleep in the corner, their small bodies curled up on the waiting chairs. Emmanuella sat quietly, her eyes fixed on her mother's fragile frame. She hadn't spoken much since the doctor's words, but inside her heart, a storm raged. Clement stood a few steps away, his hands folded behind his back. He had faced boardrooms, journalists, and leaders across the world, but the silence in that room pressed harder on him than any of them ever had. Finally, she turned. Her eyes were red, swollen from tears, but sharp. You need to tell me the truth, Clement. No more riddles. Who are you? He held her gaze, realizing the moment he had feared and hoped for had come. I wasn't always here at the bus park, he began quietly. I didn't end up there because I had nowhere else to go. That night you met me. It wasn't chance. I had been attacked, robbed, and left with nothing on me. But the truth is, I am not a poor man, Emmanuella. Her breath caught. I am Clement Obasui, he continued, his voice steady. Owner of CO Holdings, the businesses, the estates. They are mine. I am a billionaire. The words hung in the air, heavy and unreal. For a long moment, Emmanuella just stared at him, as though he had spoken another language. Then she let out a sharp, disbelieving laugh. Do you expect me to believe that? You, a billionaire walking around chasing buses like an ordinary man? Clement didn't flinch. He pulled out his phone and with a few taps showed her. Headlines, photos, articles. His face in crisp suits, standing beside powerful men, his name in bold print. Her eyes widened as the screen confirmed everything he said. The floor seemed to fall out from under her. She stood, backing away from him as if he were a stranger. So all this time you were lying to me? Playing games with me? Watching me struggle? Watching my family suffer? When you had the power to change everything? Her voice broke. She was trembling, torn between anger and betrayal. Clement stepped forward, his voice soft but urgent. No, Emmanuella, I never lied about me. The man you've come to know, the one who respects your strength, who admires your sacrifice. That's the real Clement. I just wanted to be seen for who I am, not for the money, not for the name. But Emmanuella shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. You should have told me. You should have trusted me. And with that, she turned away, her shoulders stiff, her world spinning. Clement stood there silent, knowing he had finally lifted the veil, and in doing so might have lost the only woman who had ever truly seen him. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Emmanuella returned to the bus park, but everything felt different. The people, the noise, the daily struggle, all of it was unchanged, but she was no longer the same. Her eyes sought Clement in the crowd, but when she found him, she quickly looked away. Clement still came, waiting patiently near the buses, offering a quiet smile, a greeting. But Emmanuella's answers were short, her tone distant. She had built a wall around herself, one he could not cross. At night she lay awake, her thoughts restless. She remembered how he had called the ambulance, how her mother's life had been saved because of him. But then she remembered his revelation, the wealth he had hidden, and the hurt returned sharper than before. Why didn't he trust me, she thought. Why did he have to test me like I was one of those women chasing riches? Her siblings noticed her mood, but she brushed their questions aside. She couldn't tell them, not yet. Meanwhile, Clement was fighting his own battle. In the past, money had solved everything. Problems vanished with a signature. People bowed with respect. But this time, money had become the very wall keeping him apart from the woman he loved. One evening, he approached her as she finished collecting fares. Emmanuella, he said quietly, please talk to me. Don't shut me out like this. She didn't look at him. You lied to me, Clement. Maybe not with your words, but with your silence. Do you know what it feels like to trust someone with your heart, only to discover they were hiding who they truly are? His chest tightened. I only wanted you to see me, not the billions. To love me for Clement, the man, not Clement, the name in the headlines. Emmanuella finally turned, her eyes wet with tears. But don't you see, by keeping it from me, you took away my choice. You decided what I should know, and when. That's not love, Clement. That's control. Her words cut deep. For the first time in his life, Clement, the man the world bowed to, felt powerless. And so, with nothing more to say, Emmanuella walked away into the night, leaving him standing alone under the fading glow of streetlights, unsure if she would ever let him back into her heart. The following week, Emmanuella's world tightened like a noose. Her mother was discharged from the hospital, but the medical bills loomed like a mountain she could never climb. Despite Clement's quiet attempt to settle the balance, Emmanuella refused. She stood at the counter, trembling but firm, insisting she would pay in small installments. The cashier raised an eyebrow, but she signed her name anyway. Later that night, she sat at the kitchen table, counting and recounting the wrinkled naira notes she had scraped together. Her siblings slept on the floor nearby, their thin breaths filling the silence. Her mother stirred in the bed, weak but alive. But the numbers never added up. No matter how many times she counted, the gap between what she had and what she owed stretched wide like a canyon. The next morning, she returned to work, exhaustion clinging to her. She forced a smile at passengers, called out routes, collected fares, but her energy was fading. Each bump of the road pressed harder against her weary body. From the corner, Clement watched. He didn't interfere, not after her rejection, but every line of her struggle tore at him. He longed to step in, to carry the weight, but he knew any offer now would only push her further away. That evening, as she stumbled home with a bag of food for her siblings, the bag tore and the few vegetables she had managed to buy scattered across the dusty street. Emmanuella dropped to her knees, frantically gathering them, her eyes blurring with tears. It was then a shadow fell over her. She looked up, and there was Clement kneeling beside her. Without a word, he helped her gather the fallen vegetables. When they stood, she looked into his eyes, ready to push him away again. But what she saw stopped her. Not pity, not pride, but quiet pain. A man watching the woman he loved break herself piece by piece, simply because she would not let him help. For the first time since his confession, Emmanuella's heart wavered. She turned away quickly, clutching the bag to her chest, but the truth pressed heavy inside her. Maybe she could not carry it all alone. The weight of everything pressed harder on Emmanuella as the days turned into weeks. Her mother's recovery was slow, her siblings needed food, and the debt from the hospital clung to her like a shadow that refused to fade. Each morning she rose before dawn, her body aching, her spirit fraying. She worked double shifts at the bus park, sometimes skipping meals so her siblings could eat. At night she returned home to a house filled with gratitude, but empty of comfort. Her strength was failing, though she would never admit it aloud. One rainy evening, after a particularly long day, she collapsed on her bed, her chest tightening as tears finally broke free. For the first time in years, she whispered aloud, "I can't do this anymore." At that very moment, Clement was outside, parked at the corner in his car. He hadn't planned to stop, but something in him had drawn him there. He sat in silence, watching the dim light in her window, fighting the urge to go in. The next day, as Emmanuella boarded her bus, she swayed slightly, her body betraying her exhaustion. A passenger caught her arm before she fell. She forced a weak smile and brushed it off. But Clement saw. He was nearby, and his heart clenched. That evening, when she finally returned home, she found him waiting at her door. His clothes were damp from the drizzle, but his eyes burned with resolve. "Emmanuella," he said softly, "please, let me help you." She stood there torn. Her pride screamed no. Her heart whispered yes. She remembered all the times she had carried burdens alone, all the times people had taken advantage of her. But Clement had proven himself different. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, "I don't want your money, Clement. I don't want to feel like I owe you." He stepped closer, his voice breaking. "Then don't owe me anything. Let me love you, that's all I want." Her breath caught. For a moment, time froze. The street quiet, the drizzle softening around them. And in that moment, Emmanuella realized this wasn't about pride anymore. It was about trust. Could she trust him with her heart, with her family, with the fragile world she had built? Her silence spoke louder than words, and Clement knew. The wall around her heart was finally beginning to crack. The morning after their conversation, Emmanuella woke with a strange stillness in her heart. For years, her life had been a constant battle against poverty, against disappointment, against her own fears. But now she faced a different kind of battle, one within herself. She spent the day in thought, torn between two voices. One whispered, "Hold on to your pride. You've survived without anyone's help before." The other answered, "But life is not meant to be endured alone. Maybe love is the help you've been praying for." That evening, Clement returned. He didn't come in a convoy, didn't dress like the billionaire the world knew him to be. He came simply as Clement, the man who had lost a wallet on a bus, the man she had nursed with water and food, the man who had held her hand when her mother fought for life. Emmanuella stood at the doorway, her siblings peeking curiously from behind her. "I came to say one last thing," Clement said, his voice steady but soft. "If you never wanted to see me again, I'll respect it. But before you decide, know this. I don't love you because you helped me. I don't love you because of what you've done. I love you because of who you are, and I don't want to change that. I only want to stand by it." Emmanuela's chest tightened. His words cut through the noise of fear and doubt. She saw the sincerity in his eyes. Not the power of a man used to getting everything, but the vulnerability of a man willing to risk everything. Slowly she stepped forward. Her siblings watched wide-eyed as she lifted her hand and placed it gently on Clement's. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I've carried this world on my shoulders for so long. I don't know how to share it. But Clement, I don't want to push you away anymore." His heart swelled. For the first time in months, a genuine smile broke across his face. He pulled her close and she didn't resist. The rain began to fall softly again, as though the heavens themselves had chosen this moment to bless them. From that day, Clement didn't try to replace Emmanuela's strength. He chose instead to stand beside it. He became part of her family's life, not as a savior, but as a partner. Her siblings grew to love him. Her mother prayed blessings over him. And slowly, Emmanuella allowed herself to believe that love could exist without debt, without shame. The world outside saw only headlines. Billionaire marries former bus conductor. But for Clement and Emmanuella, it was never about status. It was about two souls from two different worlds, finding each other in the chaos of Lagos and choosing, despite everything, to walk forward together. And so, what began with a lost wallet ended with found love, proof that sometimes the greatest riches are not measured in money, but in hearts willing to trust again.